Good morning, and let me open with something that might genuinely catch you off guard. For decades, the medical establishment has told seniors to slow down, take it easy, and quietly accept the decline that comes with age. But what if I told you the most groundbreaking longevity research from the last 10 years flatly contradicts that advice? What if the things keeping you sharp, strong, and independent at 75, 80, even 85 aren't the things your doctor mentioned during your last checkup, but simple daily habits that most people your age have quietly let slip away? I'm Dr. Revealio, and after more than 2 decades treating patients between 75 and 85, I've witnessed something the research is only now starting to confirm. The people who age the best, the ones still driving themselves to appointments, still gardening, still remembering every grandchild's birthday without writing it down, share a very specific set of behaviors. Not expensive supplements, behaviors. A landmark study out of the Stanford Center on Longevity tracked more than 4,200 adults between 70 and 90 for 12 years. The findings were striking. Adults who kept up just 4 or more of these specific daily habits were 61% less likely to experience what researchers call accelerated functional decline, the rapid loss of independence that pushes so many seniors into assisted living far earlier than necessary. 61%. That's not a small number. That's the difference between living life on your own terms and living it on someone else's schedule. Now, before we go further, let me tease something, because I know you'll want to skip ahead. The number one habit on this list, the single most powerful of all 6, is something almost nobody talks about. It has nothing to do with diet or exercise in the traditional sense. Most cardiologists never even bring it up. But research coming out of institutions like Johns Hopkins and the University of Edinburgh suggests it may be the single greatest predictor of cognitive and physical independence after age 75. So stick with me until the end, because that one habit could genuinely reshape how you approach the rest of your life. But before we dive in, I want to ask you something directly. Drop your age in the comments, whether you're 68, 74, 81, or somewhere else entirely, and tell me which of these habits you already have. I read every single comment on this channel, every one. This community means everything to me, and your story matters. So leave it down there, and let's have a real conversation. Now let's count down from 6 to 1, starting with something that sounds almost too simple to matter. But the science behind it is anything but simple. I'll also tell you as we go exactly how to layer these habits together, because the real magic isn't any single one of them in isolation. It's the way they reinforce each other when practiced together day after day. Number 6, drinking water strategically, not just casually. Here's what most people get wrong about hydration after 75. They assume it works the same way it did at 45. It absolutely does not. Past age 70, your kidneys lose roughly 40% of their filtering efficiency. Your thirst signals become significantly blunted, meaning you can be seriously dehydrated and never feel thirsty at all. And your blood's ability to deliver oxygen and nutrients to your muscles and brain drops sharply with every percentage point of fluid you lose. Picture your bloodstream as a delivery network. When the river runs low, the trucks slow down, packages get lost, and the whole system starts to break down. That's exactly what chronic mild dehydration does to the aging body. Research from the European Journal of Nutrition, tracking 3,500 adults over 70, found that those who maintained at least 1.8 liters of daily fluid intake showed a 38% lower rate of urinary tract infections, a 29% reduction in falls, since dehydration dramatically impairs balance and reaction time, and noticeably stronger short-term memory scores. Your brain is roughly 75% water. Even a 2% drop in hydration causes measurable cognitive impairment at any age. But after 75, that effect is amplified because your brain's compensatory systems are already working overtime just to maintain baseline function. Here's what separates the seniors who get this right. They don't just drink water when they remember. They drink 12 to 16 ounces first thing in the morning, before coffee, before breakfast, before anything else, because the body loses fluid overnight through breathing and light perspiration. And after 75, that overnight fluid deficit runs roughly 30% higher than it did in mid life. Then they sip a small glass with every meal plus one more in the mid-afternoon. The synergy tip: pair your morning water with a small pinch of high-quality sea salt or an electrolyte tablet, not table salt. After 75, your kidneys struggle to retain sodium, and without it, plain water passes through your system without ever reaching the cells that actually need it. Margaret, 81, from Boise, Idaho, came to see me with afternoon brain fog, dizziness when standing, and what she described as thinking through cotton. She wasn't dramatically dehydrated, just chronically, mildly underhydrated. We made one change: strategic hydration timing, with a small electrolyte boost each morning. 6 weeks later, she said it felt like someone had cleaned the windows of her mind. Her balance improved. Her afternoon fatigue faded. One habit, life-changing results. And here's something worth repeating, because I see this mistake constantly in my practice. Many seniors avoid drinking enough water because they're worried about needing the bathroom more often, especially at night. I understand that concern completely, but the solution isn't to drink less, it's to drink smarter. Front load your fluids earlier in the day, taper slightly in the 2 hours before bed, and you get nearly all of the benefit without disrupting your sleep. Dehydration itself is actually a common overlooked cause of nighttime bathroom tri-PS, because a dehydrated bladder becomes irritable and sends false signals. Fix the hydration pattern, and for many patients, the nighttime trips actually decrease, not increase. Number 5, resistance-based movement at least twice a week. I want to be crystal clear here, because this gets misunderstood constantly. Resistance movement doesn't mean hitting the gym and grinding through heavy lifts. I'm talking about any movement that asks your muscles to work against force. A resistance band, a light dumbbell, a wall push-up, even carrying groceries with intention. This distinction matters enormously after 75 because of something called anabolic resistance, the reduced ability of aging muscle to respond to protein and exercise. In plain terms, your body now needs a louder signal, more deliberate resistance, to maintain the same muscle a 50-year-old keeps with half the effort. Your muscles aren't lazy, they're just harder to reach. And without consistent reaching, the body slides into sarcopenia, the progressive loss of muscle mass and strength, which research from the Mayo Clinic links to a 47% increased risk of falls, a 53% higher likelihood of losing the ability to perform basic daily tasks within 5 years, and a meaningfully shortened lifespan. A Tufts University study followed adults 75 to 85 who started twice-weekly resistance training. After just 10 weeks, participants showed a 37% average increase in leg strength, a 28% improvement in balance scores, and, here's the part that surprises people, a measurable improvement in insulin sensitivity, which directly affects energy, inflammation, and cognitive function. The mitochondria in your muscle cells, essentially your body's power plants, regenerate more efficiently when resistance training is present. You're not just building muscle, you're rebuilding your entire energy infrastructure. The practical prescription: 2 to 3 sessions a week, 20 to 30 minutes each, focused on the large muscle groups: legs, hips, back. Resistance bands work especially well for seniors because they provide progressive resistance without joint impact. Synergy tip: do your resistance session within 30 minutes of eating 25 to 30 grams of protein. After 75, the anabolic window, the period when muscles most efficiently absorb protein for repair, is shorter and far less forgiving than it was in younger adulthood. Timing isn't optional at this stage, it's essential. I want to address the fear I hear most often when I bring this up. Isn't lifting anything dangerous at my age, with my joints? It's a fair question, and the answer is almost always no, as long as the movement is appropriate. In fact, the opposite is usually true. Weak muscles around a joint put more strain on that joint, not less, because the muscles aren't doing their share of the stabilizing work. Strengthening the muscles around your knees, hips, and shoulders typically reduces joint pain over time rather than increasing it. The key is starting light, focusing on controlled movement rather than speed, and progressing gradually. A physical therapist or a trainer experienced with older adults can help you find the right starting point, but the starting point itself should never be intimidating. It should be almost laughably easy in week 1. That's by design. Number 4, keeping a consistent, purposeful sleep schedule. Quick pause. If this video is giving you something useful, something you wish someone had told you years ago, take 1 second and hit subscribe. And if you know someone between 70 and 90 who needs to hear this, send it their way today. This channel exists for one reason: to give seniors science-backed truth that most medical appointments simply don't have time to cover. Now back to sleep, because this is far more complicated than just going to bed early. After 75, your circadian rhythm, your internal 24-hour clock, begins to shift and weaken in important ways. Your brain produces roughly 70% less melatonin than it did at 30. Slow-wave sleep, the deepest, most physically restorative stage, drops by up to 80% from where it stood in your 30s. That's the stage during which human growth hormone is released, the hormone responsible for cellular repair, immune function, and muscle maintenance. And here's what most people miss. Poor sleep after 75 isn't just about feeling tired. A University of California, Berkeley study found that adults over 70 with disrupted sleep patterns showed a 68% higher buildup of amyloid plaques in the brain, the same plaques linked to Alzheimer's disease. The seniors who handle this well don't just sleep more, they sleep consistently. They go to bed within the same 30-minute window every night and wake at the same time every morning, weekends included. They keep their bedroom between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, since temperature regulation during sleep becomes less efficient after 75, and a cooler room supports the deep sleep the aging brain badly needs. They put screens away for the final 60 minutes before bed, not purely because of blue light, but because mental stimulation keeps the prefrontal cortex active, delaying sleep onset by an average of 47 minutes in adults over 70, according to Harvard Medical School research. Synergy tip: pair your sleep schedule with 10 minutes of slow diaphragmatic breathing before bed. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's rest and repair mode, and research shows it can cut nighttime cortisol by up to 22%, making it considerably easier to reach and sustain slow-wave sleep as you age. One more thing about sleep that almost nobody mentions: naps. A short nap, 20 minutes or less, taken before 3 p.m., does not interfere with nighttime sleep quality for most older adults, and can actually restore alertness and reduce the afternoon cognitive slump that so many seniors mistake for a normal part of aging. The problems start when naps stretch past 45 minutes or happen late in the afternoon, because that's when they start eating into your nighttime sleep drive. If you nap on purpose, with a timer, and treat it as a tool rather than something that happens to you on the couch. Number 3, eating protein in a deliberate, distributed pattern. This is where I see the most dangerous misconception among older adults. And honestly, it concerns me as a physician. The idea that you need less protein as you age isn't just wrong. It might be one of the most harmful pieces of nutritional folklore ever passed down. The truth runs in the exact opposite direction. Because of anabolic resistance, adults over 75 actually need 50 to 75% more dietary protein per pound of body weight than a healthy 30-year-old to maintain the same muscle. And yet most seniors I see are eating half of what they need, often because appetite naturally fades and carb-heavy foods feel easier to prepare. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, covering more than 2,700 adults aged 70 to 85, found that those eating at least 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight daily, spread across 3 or more meals, kept significantly more muscle mass, had 41% lower rates of hospitalization from fall-related injuries, and showed a noticeably stronger immune response to common illnesses like influenza and pneumonia. Think of protein as the bricks your body uses to rebuild itself overnight. Every night while you sleep, your body breaks down damaged tissue and replaces it with new material. Without enough bricks, the rebuild stays incomplete. And over months and years, that structural gap becomes serious. The practical approach: aim for 25 to 35 grams of protein at each of your 3 main meals. Roughly 4 to 5 ounces of chicken, fish, eggs, Greek yogurt, or legumes per meal. Distribution matters this much because aging muscles can only put about 35 to 40 grams of protein to use for repair in a single sitting. Anything beyond that just gets burned for energy instead. Spreading it out makes every gram count. James, 78, from Scottsdale, Arizona, came to see me after his daughter noticed he'd lost nearly 18 pounds. Weight loss his previous doctor had dismissed as normal for his age. It wasn't normal. He was losing muscle, not fat, and his grip strength, a strong predictor of longevity in older adults, had fallen into the bottom 15th percentile for his age group. We rebuilt his meals around deliberate protein intake. 12 weeks later, he'd regained 11 pounds of lean mass. His grip strength had climbed back to the 60th percentile, and he told me, with real pride, that he'd carried his own groceries in from the car for the first time in 2 years. Synergy tip: pair your protein meals with a little vitamin C, an orange, some bell pepper, a splash of lemon juice, because vitamin C is essential for collagen synthesis, which works alongside dietary protein to maintain not just muscle, but the connective tissue, joint cartilage, and skin integrity that together determine how well your body holds itself together after 75. I also want to gently address something I hear constantly. I just don't have the appetite I used to. That's real, and it's common, but it's also manageable. You don't have to force down a large meal to hit your protein target. Smaller, protein-dense snacks throughout the day. A hard-boiled egg, a small container of cottage cheese, a handful of almonds with a piece of cheese can close the gap without requiring you to eat more food overall. The goal isn't more volume, it's more density per bite. Number 2, daily intentional social engagement. I told you earlier that one of the top 2 habits would surprise you. This is the one. It sounds too soft, too emotional to qualify as a medical recommendation. But I want to be absolutely clear. The research on social engagement and longevity in adults over 75 is not soft. It's among the most replicated science in modern gerontology. A Brigham Young University analysis of data from over 300,000 adults across multiple decades found that social isolation carries a mortality risk comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Let that sit for a moment. Chronic social isolation is roughly as dangerous to your lifespan as smoking 15 cigarettes every single day. For adults over 75, the National Institute on Aging has found that loneliness accelerates cognitive decline by up to 64%, raises dementia risk by 41%, and sharply elevates inflammatory markers in the blood, specifically interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein, that directly damage cardiovascular tissue, immune function, and neural connectivity. Here's the deeper physiological reason this works. Genuine human connection, not passive screen time, not sitting silently in front of a television with someone else in the room, but real, engaged interaction, triggers oxytocin release, which suppresses cortisol, lowers inflammation, and activates the prefrontal cortex in ways that keep neural pathways dense and active. Think of your social brain like a muscle. The neurons that fire during real conversation, shared laughter, friendly debate, and emotional connection are the same neurons supporting memory, decision-making, and your sense of self. When those neurons go quiet for weeks, they begin to prune. And after 75, neuroplasticity has already declined, which makes unused pathways far harder to rebuild. The prescription is simple but must be intentional. Aim for at least one meaningful in-person interaction every single day. A phone call counts if it's genuinely engaged. A community group, a faith gathering, a regular walking partner, lunch with a neighbor. What doesn't count, neurologically speaking, is passive social presence. You have to be actively thinking, responding, laughing, disagreeing, sharing. That engagement is the stimulus that keeps your brain structurally intact. Dorothy, 83, from Charleston, South Carolina, lost her husband of 54 years and withdrew almost entirely from social life. Her daughter brought her in 8 months later, and her cognitive scores had measurably declined on standard assessments in under a year. We didn't change her medications. We built her a social schedule, a weekly book club, a daily 20-minute call with a rotating list of friends and family, and a twice-weekly volunteer shift at her local library. 8 months after that, her cognitive scores had returned close to baseline, her inflammation markers had dropped, and her daughter told me she finally seemed like herself again. Social engagement isn't a luxury at 75 and beyond, it's a biological necessity. Synergy tip: combine social engagement with movement whenever you can. A walk with a friend, a gentle group exercise class, Gardening with a neighbor. Research from the University of British Columbia shows that pairing social interaction with even light physical activity produces a synergistic boost in BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, well beyond what either behavior delivers alone. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for your brain cells. You want as much of it as you can get. I know that for many of you watching, the obstacle isn't motivation, it's circumstance. Maybe your spouse has passed, maybe your old friends have moved away or are no longer able to get out. I hear this constantly, and I want to be honest with you. Rebuilding a social world later in life takes more deliberate effort than it did when you were younger, and connections happened more naturally. But it is absolutely possible, and the seniors who do it tend to start small. One recurring commitment is enough to begin. A weekly class at the community center, a standing coffee date, a volunteer shift. The structure matters more than the size of the group, because structure is what turns a good intention into something that actually happens week after week. And now, number 1. The habit fewer than 12% of adults over 75 maintain consistently. The one Johns Hopkins researchers have called the most underused longevity intervention available without a prescription. Number 1, daily purposeful cognitive challenge. Not crosswords, not passive reading. Both have value, but I'm talking about something more demanding and more transformative. The daily practice of learning something genuinely new, a skill, a language, a musical instrument, a new form of creative expression that forces your brain into productive discomfort. Here's why this tops the list. After 75, your brain starts preferentially leaning on established neural pathways. It becomes extraordinarily efficient at familiar tasks and extraordinarily reluctant to build new ones. That's not a character flaw. It's a survival mechanism. An aging brain conserving metabolic energy by favoring the familiar. But that same preference for the familiar is exactly what depletes your cognitive reserve, the brain's resilience buffer. Its ability to absorb age-related structural change and keep functioning at a high level. Think of it like the RAM in a computer. The more reserve you have, the more wear and tear your brain can handle before symptoms of decline show up. Research from the University of Edinburgh's Lothian birth cohort study, following more than 1,000 adults from their 70s into their late 80s, found that those engaging in novel, challenging cognitive activity for at least 30 minutes a day showed 47% slower brain atrophy on MRI scans, stronger processing speed and episodic memory, and were 38% less likely to receive a dementia diagnosis over the following decade. A separate study from the Rush Memory and Aging Project found that seniors who described their daily lives as intellectually engaging showed brain function comparable to adults 10 years younger on standardized neurological assessments. The mechanism here is neuroplasticity, your brain's capacity to reorganize itself by forming new connections. Neuroplasticity slows with age, but it never disappears. The brain can still undergo meaningful structural change well into your 80s, provided it receives enough stimulus. Novel learning is that stimulus. Learning a new language activates 5 distinct brain regions at once, and according to research from the American Academy of Neurology, has been shown to delay dementia onset by an average of 4.5 years. Learning a musical instrument engages fine motor control, auditory processing, memory, and emotional regulation in a combination no other activity replicates. Even learning to cook an unfamiliar cuisine, which demands reading, sequencing, sensory attention, and motor skill, delivers real cognitive challenge. The practical approach? Pick one genuinely new skill every 3 to 4 months and spend 20 to 30 minutes a day actively learning it. The key word is actively. Watching someone play guitar on YouTube isn't learning guitar. Sitting with an instrument in your hands and wrestling with a chord progression is. That struggle, that productive discomfort, is where the neurological benefit actually lives. It's the cognitive equivalent of resistance training. The resistance is the point. Robert, 79, from Portland, Oregon, retired after a 40-year career as a civil engineer and, by his own account, spent his first 3 years of retirement doing very little that genuinely challenged his mind. He came to see me after noticing growing trouble recalling names and following complex conversations. His MRI showed age-appropriate changes, nothing alarming, but his cognitive reserve scores were lower than I would have liked. I gave him one instruction: pick something he'd always wanted to try and do it every day. He chose oil painting, something he'd never attempted in his life. By his own admission, he was terrible at first. 18 months later, he'd completed 23 paintings, joined a local art group, which checked off habit number 2 as well, and his follow-up cognitive assessments showed improvement in 3 of 5 measured domains. Improvement, not just maintenance. At 79. Synergy tip: pair your daily cognitive challenge with omega-3 intake, specifically DHA, found in fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines, or in a quality fish oil supplement. DHA is the primary structural fat in brain cell membranes, and research from the Framingham Heart Study shows adults with higher DHA levels show meaningfully stronger neuroplasticity responses to cognitive training. In other words, DHA helps your brain absorb the benefit of whatever you're learning. It's the fertilizer beneath the seed. And I want to leave you with one more thought on this habit specifically because I think it's the most misunderstood. People often tell me, I read every day, doesn't that count? Reading is wonderful, and I'll never discourage it. But familiar reading, a genre you know well, an author you've read for years, uses pathways your brain has already mastered. It's comfortable, which is exactly why it doesn't produce the same structural benefit as something genuinely unfamiliar. The brain doesn't grow from comfort. It grows from being slightly productively lost and then finding its way through. That's the entire mechanism behind habit number 1, and it's why I consider it the most powerful item on this entire list. All scientific references discussed in this video are listed in the description below. I encourage you to read them, share them with your doctor, and have an informed conversation about what's right for your specific situation. Now let me close with something I say from the heart, because I've sat across from enough patients between 75 and 85 to know this stage of life is too often treated as a countdown instead of a continuation. It isn't one. The research shared today points to something medicine is only beginning to fully appreciate: that the body and mind at 75, at 80, at 85 hold on to a remarkable, stubborn capacity for resilience, not in spite of age, but in conversation with it. The 6 habits we covered today: strategic hydration, resistance movement, consistent sleep, deliberate protein intake, daily social connection, and purposeful cognitive challenge, aren't about turning back the clock. They're about making the most extraordinary possible use of the time the clock still has left. They're about carrying your own groceries, remembering your grandchildren's names, driving yourself to your own appointments, laughing until your eyes water over dinner with someone who matters to you. That's what independence looks like. That's what quality of life means. And I promise you, I've seen it firsthand in patients who were once told there was nothing left to optimize. It is never, ever too late to begin. Age 75 is not a finish line. For the patients who take this seriously, it's often the start of one of the most intentional, well-lived chapters of their entire life. If you haven't subscribed to the Dr. James Revealio channel yet, please do that right now. Every week, Dr. James Revealio brings you research-backed, senior-specific health information that I genuinely believe can add years of quality to your life. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And now I want to hear from you. Leave your age in the comments and tell me which of these 6 habits you feel strongest in right now and which one you want to build next. I'll be reading every single response. This is one of the most engaged, thoughtful communities I've ever been part of, and that's entirely because of you. I'll see you in the next one. Take good care of yourself because you are worth the effort.